Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to our first virtual product exposition for 2026. We are thrilled that you have thawed out or in the process of thawing out after a long and record-setting winter to join us today for what I believe is to be one of the most critical topics that's changed how we do business in our industry in some time, and that is how to navigate through the refrigerant charge compliance for ASHRAE safety standards. And today's presentation is going to be focused on the available LDS accessories for all of our R32 systems, specifically within the H-Series product line. And really, I believe that by the end of this presentation, you'll see that we have you covered for navigating compliance for pretty much any application of our H-Series systems, whether it be residential to commercial. My name is Wayne DeCosa. I am the Applications Engineering Manager here, and today I'm co-presenting with our esteemed Product Manager, Kushal Mohan, and together we will provide some information that I'm sure you're going to find relevant and applicable to every H-Series project as of today and moving forward. So thanks again for attending, and let's dive into today's presentation. A quick introduction for those who may not know me. I've been part of the AIRSTAGE team for over 10 years now, hard to believe, and with the product team for 6 years after previously serving as commissioning engineer and commercial training manager. Now, my HVAC R background spans from working in my father's sheet metal shop all the way back in the 1970s, been around a long time, followed by a 4-year tour in the U.S. Army that started in 1980. I worked with the Pershing 1A nuclear missile system. Post-military service, I furthered my education in electronics and then spent years in the field as an AC and refrigeration tech before hanging up my gauges, so to speak, and moving into a factory support role way back in 1997. And yes, the hat is proof that time marches on and I've grown too tall for my hair. So with that, enough said about me, and let's introduce Kushal.
Hello, everyone. Thank you, Wayne. Thank you. My name is Kushal Mohan. I'm the product manager for the residential lineup here with Fujitsu AirStage. I've been with Fujitsu since 2021, and I started off as a product specialist, and right now serving as a product manager for the Westinghouse and the H-Series lineups. And back to you, Wayne. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you, Kushal, and it is a pleasure to work with you and call you my friend. So let's take a look at today's agenda. We're going to begin with an overview of LDS applications, what an LDS device is, really, when it's needed, and what mitigation options are available for our H-Series systems. Next, after that, Kushal will dive into the parts and components that will work with our equipment, including the ever-important over-the-air firmware update that enables the LDS compatibility for our current production wall-mounted units. After that, I'll come back at the end to share a couple of practical examples to close out today's discussion. And before we move forward, note the gas sensor and expansion kit there on your screen. And these are basically the two LDS solution options used to activate a mitigation sequence. And although today's session is going to be focused on our single-phase H-Series system, these two devices that you see are also applied to VRF applications, which we will unpack in a future VPX. So first, I'd like to clarify two terms that you're going to hear used in our industry, LDS and RDS. And according to the ASHRAE definition, an RDS is a refrigeration detection system that's defined as a system or a combination of system that uses one or more stationary devices to detect the presence of refrigerant concentration, and as you see in the red italics, initiates one or more mitigation actions required by the standard. Now, the reason I have that italicized is it's important because both these mitigation action options are initiated by means of our LDS accessories. So really, for practical purposes, we use the term LDS in lieu of RDS. So really think of LDS and RDS as interchangeable within our discussions and moving forward. So I don't want you to get hung up on the difference between the two. So Kushal will be covering product compatibility, but I have to steal part of his thunder here real quick and point out that a standout advantage of the AIRSTAGE product line is that our all-new AGUH floor-mounted units, along with every R32 ducted unit, yes, I said every R32 ducted unit, will include a factory-installed integrated LDS which qualifies as a detection system. So I believe this is really important to remember given the strong adoption and popularity of both our mid-static and multi-position air handling units. So in case you didn't know, we have hours of archived presentations on YouTube that provide detailed guidance on when an LDS is required. And in addition to that, we've got within our applications library just a tremendous amount of product and application specific video tutorials designed to help you through ASHRAE compliance navigation. And if you haven't explored these resources yet, I'd really encourage you to take some time to review them because they really help simplify some complex topics that are otherwise, as I like to say, ambiguous at best. So although today's focus is going to be on LDS devices, it is helpful to briefly review when an LDS is required. And really, as I have it there in simple terms, an LDS is needed when the dispersal volume of a space is too small relative to the system's total refrigerant charge. Now, keep in mind, the total refrigerant charge is a function of the factory pre-charge as well as any additional refrigerant that's added for extended liquid line lengths. And an important thing to keep in mind, too, is that dispersal volume is not always going to be the same as the room volume, which is why those resources that I mentioned just a moment ago are valuable for simplifying and helping through safety standard compliance navigation. Now, I just mentioned that our R32 ducted and floor-mounted units include a factory-installed gas sensor that qualify as an LDS. So here's another important application detail to remember that under ASHRAE standard 15.2 for residential and 15 for commercial ducted applications, an LDS is not required when the total system charge is 4 pounds or less. So that's kind of an easy number to remember. Now, that 4 pound threshold becomes significant because it means that many of our A-Series systems are already refrigerant charge compliant right out of the box. It's a claim I like to often boast about, but instead of relying upon my words alone, let's take a look at some actual charge data and see how the numbers support that. So this table that you're looking at on the right is an excerpt from one of our more popular application bulletins for navigating compliance requirements. Internally, what we like to call our cheat sheet, and we have one available for both commercial and one for residential standards. Now, a quick shout out here to our senior applied systems engineer, Mr. Leonard Stahl, who created these and really many other helpful tables for you to use to include our 3C charge compliance calculator. Again, that's within Access. Now, as a reminder, under the ASHRAE guidelines, as I mentioned, the systems with 4 pounds or less are automatically compliant. So you'll notice that in the green columns there that nearly all of our single zone systems fall below that 4 pound threshold, at least up to the refrigerant charge pre-charge length for the piping. Now, since that's really going to apply to many of your projects, I guess you could say we could wrap up the VPX right here. But Kushal and I want to ensure that you're fully prepared for 100% of your projects and nothing less. So if you have seen any of our previous presentations, or if you've seen this document that I'm referring to, this info is not news to you that even when we exceed a piping pre-charge allowance for the maximum piping length, most of our H-Series single zone systems still contain less than 4 pounds of refrigerant. So if you look at those two right-hand columns that are shaded in green there, that is the max charge, and that's based upon the maximum piping length. So pardon my seeming repetition of stating this 4 pound threshold, but I believe it's AIRSTAGE engineering excellence that helps usher in this important threshold. Now, you've probably been wondering about this, so we'll go ahead and talk about it, and that is, what about multi-zone systems? So we covered single zone, but what about multi-zone? So the good news is that many of our smaller capacity multi-zone systems still fall within that 4 pound threshold. Again, at least when we're talking about up to the factory pre-charge piping length. So what makes this convenient really is that both the single zone and multi-zone tables give you a quick at-a-glance way to confirm standard compliance. That is, you can easily check both the pre-charge piping limits and the maximum piping length allowances without having to do any piping calculations for in between. So from this point, we can start to look at some applications where adding an LDS becomes necessary. And honestly, I think it's a lot easier than you'd expect. So let's walk through a couple LDS options that are currently available literally as of today. The first and more widely used of the two LDS options is the wall-mounted gas sensor. And you'll note up top, there's actually two model numbers. The first, the UTY-SG-ZU, is a current production sensor, and future production is with the familiar Z1 suffix when a revision is made. So functionally between the two, they're the same, and Kushal will be providing some details about these sensor features. And speaking of functionality of the two mitigation options, there's circulation and ventilation, and we'll talk about those. But circulation is going to be used most often, which requires both the gas sensor that you see, and I'll say it once, but I'll refer to it from this point forward as the UART cable. That's the UTY-XWZXZL that you see in the bottom bullet. So the UART cable provides the connection between the gas sensor and the indoor unit UART port. So, but keep in mind, these components are, guess what? They're not required when using our ducted and floor-mounted units because, again, they have the factory installed gas sensor. So to recap, the first level of mitigation for charge compliance is circulation. Of course, it has to be detected first, but the control action, you might say, is circulation. So to achieve an immediate system shutdown for the system and provide that indoor unit fan override, the two components that you need are what you see there, the gas sensor and the connection cable. So the cable itself is a simple plug and play at both ends, but the total distance between the indoor unit and gas sensor, if it exceeds 16 feet of wiring length, an expansion kit's going to be required, which we'll get to momentarily. So keep in mind that 16-foot limit. It's also important to remember that the gas sensor must be installed no more than 12 inches above the floor level. So that's why, again, you want to factor the 16 feet. So again, as an important reminder, if you are installing a ducted or floor-mounted unit, you guessed it, you will not need the LDS accessory items that you see here. So before discussing how the expansion kit can address the cable length limitations I just mentioned, let's talk about the kit itself. And in simple terms, from an installation and wiring standpoint, you could say that the expansion kit acts as a connection hub that manages the inputs and outputs required when the next level of mitigation is required, which is ventilation. So unlike circulation, ventilation will activate a third-party fan or ERV or HRV or some other device to introduce outdoor air or air from another space to dilute the refrigerant in the space if that concentration threshold is exceeded. So again, ventilation helps dilute by introduction of additional air. So it's important to note that whenever the expansion kit is used, you're going to need the gas sensor also, again, except for units that have the factory installed LDS. So that's important to know. Now, the kit also provides some additional outputs, including connections for an optional third-party alarm and shutoff valve kit. However, shutoff valve kits, if you're familiar with those are used exclusively for our AIRSTAGE VRF systems and not H-Series. However, it's the exact same hardware. It's the same expansion kit that's used in both product lines. So with that overview in mind, let's return back to circulation and see how the expansion kit can help address gas sensor distance requirements that go beyond 16 feet. So earlier we covered that the gas sensor connects directly to the indoor unit for circulation as mitigation, with the ever important note that, again, that UART cable is limited to 16 feet, which, by the way, in case you're wondering, cannot be extended in the field. That's just a function of the communication power circuitry. So if and when the wiring distance exceeds 16 feet between the gas sensor and the indoor unit, an option you have here is the UTZ-JUXA, otherwise known as the expansion kit, that can be used to connect the gas sensor instead. So as you see in this configuration, off to the right with the dashed line, a field-provided cable, minimum 3 conductors, now allows up to 65 feet, so pretty generous, to the gas sensor. Now there's also that UART cable. It actually comes with the expansion kit, and that's what connects the that's what connects the expansion kit to the indoor unit. That cable also is 16 feet, and usually that distance is not going to be a concern. So in summary, because the UART cable, because of the length limitations when connecting the gas sensor directly to the indoor unit, it's really important to plan the LDS component placement prior to installation so you don't wind up in the field with something that you cannot install. So now that we touched upon the mitigation options, that is circulation and ventilation, let's go ahead and clearly define them and their differences, starting with circulation that you see in red on the upper left. So as the name implies, this strategy is strictly just an override of the indoor unit fan. That's it, combined with an immediate system shutdown when a refrigerant concentration threshold is detected. Now, circulation refers to the continued movement of indoor air. So what we're doing is we're helping to disperse or distribute any concentrated refrigerant within a space. And it's really that straightforward. So it's just an indoor unit fan override. Now, as we learned, circulation requires only two accessories to activate. That is the gas sensor and the UART connection cable. And again, as I've said, I'm going to say it numerous times, if you have a ducted or floor-mounted unit, you guessed it, you do not need any of these additional items to initiate circulation. Now, by comparison, the ventilation mitigation option operates quite differently, even though it is initiated by the same LDS, the gas sensor, again, whether factory installed or the wall-mounted option that you see there. Now, in this configuration, a third-party ventilation fan that you see in the upper right is connected through an external output from the expansion kit. So the expansion kit doesn't power the fan itself. Rather, it's a 12-volt output that operates a DC relay that completes either a line voltage or low voltage control circuit required to operate the fan. So the ventilation air is used to dilute the refrigerant during a leak event, and it can be sourced from either the outdoor air or air from another space indoors if it has sufficient volume. Now, in the previous example, the gas sensor connected directly to the expansion kit, not the indoor unit, again using a field-provided cable with a maximum allowable length of 65 feet. So the D&T image that you see here shows really how simple it is to set up the circuitry for ventilation fan activation. Now you note that the output is identical to the AIRSTAGE indoor unit external outputs that really we've used for many years, and maybe some of you are very familiar with, where we use a DC relay, such as a RIB relay, more specifically an RIB-U1C. And that's ideal because it meets the output requirements and really is readily available at distributor locations and is inexpensive. Now, what I like is a great convenience is when you connect to the expansion kit input or outputs, we now use pushpin type connectors. So that means no additional cable accessories are required. So the expansion kit also provides an additional 12-volt DC output that can be used to activate a third-party alarm, like you see there just below the ventilation fan. So it's important to note that the alarm can be used in conjunction with the ventilation fan or independently for notification purposes only. Really, the specific use of the ventilation and alarm outputs will depend upon the details of the mitigation requirements for the project. So in other words, the expansion kit can be used strictly for circulation. It can be used just for ventilation, or it can be used for circulation and ventilation, or it can be used for circulation, ventilation, and alarm. So again, you can mix and match, you might say. Now, when it comes to inputs, the expansion kit offers a lot of inputs, if I could just summarize simply by saying they are identical to the traditional external inputs that we've used also for years, again, that you're probably familiar with, such as Operation Stop, Emergency Stop, or Force Stop. Now, those kinds of external inputs could be used for auxiliary devices such as a window sensor, occupancy sensor, condensate switch, or even, say, a smoke detector. And Kushal, it's up to you, bud.
Thank you so much, Wayne. For those of you who missed the first 2 minutes of this presentation, just to quickly introduce myself again, my name is Kushal Mohan. I am the Residential Product Manager with Fujitsu. Now let's dive into the leak detection system accessories. The LDS is pretty much built in all the ducted indoor units as well as our floor-mounted units. This LDS sensor is designed to detect the R32 refrigerant leak. The sensor is powered by the IDU itself, and the power consumption is so low, around 4 milliampere, that even if the indoor unit is powered off, the sensor continues to work and detect refrigerant leak. The accessory you see below, the UTY SGZU and the Z1 version of it, are comparable to our non-ducted models. And on the right side, you can see how the built-in LDS is positioned on the multi-position air handler, and as well as the horizontal ducted. It sits on the side wall, enclosed within the sensor box and the sensor holder. Now, let's look into the compatibility of the LDS accessories. As you can see, and as we have mentioned, the ducted models, that is our multi-position AHU, mid-static ducted, and the slim duct, come with, and also the floor mount models come with a built-in LDS. The accessory, the UTY-HGZU, is compatible with our compact cassette and large cassette, and also compatible with all our whole wall mount lineup. As you can see, it is compatible with the entire tier offerings of our wall mount except the KN series. Now, I just want to make a note here to say the currently produced units require a software update to enable the compatibility between the LDS accessory and the Indo unit, which I'll go over in the next few slides. But future production models will come with the software update from the factory itself. Now let's talk about the SGZU and SGZU Z1. Wayne did give you a little introduction about this accessory. I just want to highlight a couple of features and we'll move forward after that. Now, this is a wall-mounted gas sensor and cannot be installed 12 inches above the ground. And this sensor is designed to detect the R32 refrigerant leak. The sensor includes visual LED indicators to show the user leak status, as well as an audible alarm beep that will alert the occupant if there's any leak. To connect this accessory with the indoor unit, you'll need the UART cable, that is the UTY-XW-ZXZL, which is 16 feet of length. And if you want extension, as Wayne mentioned, we'll be using the expansion kit. UTY-HGZU is currently available on storefront, and the UTY-HGZU Z1 will be available soon. The only difference that I want to note between the two versions of the HGZU is that the current model, that the UTY-HGZU, the lifespan of it is 10 years, and the new version, the HGZU Z1, which will be coming up soon, will have a lifespan of 13 years. And that is the only difference. Now, let's talk about the summary of the compatibility between the LDS accessory and the H-Series models. As you can see, the IDU type, we have listed all the different IDU types we have, the wall-mounted, ducted, ceiling suspended cassettes, and the floor-mounted. And under the wall-mounted, we have listed all the series that fall under the wall-mounted section. And as you can see, except the KNAS Altair 300 family, the rest of the wall-mounted models are compatible with the gas sensor kit. Down below, we can see that the ducted and the floor-mounted includes the leak detection sensor, like built in from the factory. The ceiling suspended and the cassettes will be compatible with the accessory similar to the wall-mounted units, and they all will need the UART cable. Now let's talk about the OTA software update. What is the software update? The OTA software update is pretty much like a software update that you download to your cell phone, right? The OTA software update is for select R32 wall-mounted units to ensure that it is compatible, to enable the compatibility between the LDS accessory and the indoor unit. Now, the software update will be done through Wi-Fi. So if the wall-mount unit does not have a built-in Wi-Fi, you'll have to get the Wi-Fi adapter to make sure that the indoor unit is connected to the Wi-Fi. And there's no other tools that are required to make this over-the-air software update happen. The software update can be done via two methods. One is automatic, the other one is manual. Under the automatic method, all you have to do is go, once the Wi-Fi is commissioned to the indoor unit, you go to the AIRSTAGE mobile app and the automatic update settings page. And on the page, you have the option to select the time that you want the update to happen. Once you do that, and on the desired time, the unit will start updating the software automatically. And when this happens, the unit will stop operating. The unit will remain on, but it will stop operating. And once the update is complete, the system remains off. All you have to do is manually turn the system on and set it to the desired mode to continue operation. Now it's very similar on the manual update, but the only difference is that you'll have to go into the firmware availability section, check for the updated software notification, download the software, and click start. Once you click start, it will start updating the software. The system will stop operation. The system will not be able to operate during the update process, and the lights on the indoor unit will blink in a certain pattern to show that the software is being updated. And throughout the update process, the Wi-Fi has to be connected, and it has to remain connected. And once the update is complete, the app will return to the firmware information screen showing you that the update was complete, and the unit remains off. The user will have to manually restart the system. One note that I want to do here is that the system will remain off after the update is complete. The user will have to manually turn the system on and set it to the desired mode to continue operation. The auto restart will be disabled after the software update. Now, the OTA was released in two batches. The first batch of the OTA went out January 26th, and the first batch covered the ASUH 7 through 15 kPAS models. And the second software update batch went out February 9th, covering the rest of the wall mount models. Now, the LDS accessory, that is the UTY SGZU and the Z1, is not comparable to the KN series, so the KN series did not receive a software update. The last thing that I want to do here is highlight a couple resources, two beautiful application bulletins put together by Mr. Wayne DeCosa. The first one covers the OTA update methods, includes all the details about the automatic and the manual update. It includes screenshots, gives you directions and instructions on how to get the software update done, and also gives you what are the requirements, what Wi-Fi adapter is required to make your unit Wi-Fi compatible to have this software updated. And the second one talks about the refrigerant leak mitigation options, all the accessories that we mentioned, all the accessories that we talked about during this presentation, all the instructions and details were pertaining to installing that, getting that connected, and also gives you an overview of the compatibility with the H-Series systems. And that being said, that covers my section of the presentation. Back to you, Wayne.
Thank you, Kushal. That was great. So to summarize then, the OTA updates are for the wall-mounted units only. Future production wall-mount units will have the firmware as part of the production. So good. Thank you. Got it. So let's take a look at a scenario where you could find in, say, a multi-zone system where you've got this challenge of a dispersal volume that might be too small to manage the entire system charge. Now, I'd like to preface this example by emphasizing again that the vast majority of the time, system charge compliance is achieved out of the box, as we've discussed, or with a gas sensor to activate circulation. But so let's take a look at kind of a worst case scenario, you might say, to demonstrate the compliance flexibility using the LDS options that we have available. So for discussion purposes, let's state that zone 2 that you see there on the lower right has got the smallest dispersal volume, which is a function of dispersal area multiplied by the dispersal height. In this case, that you see is only 2 feet. So the first question you might be asking is, why is the dispersal height only 2 feet when, say, we have a ceiling height that could be 8 feet, for example? So the quick answer is because we are going to provide the all-new AGUH floor-mounted unit for this zone, where the lowest point of supply air distribution is actually at the minimum allowed by the standard anyway, which is 2 feet. So now that we know that, the next step would be to refer back to our standard 15.2 cheat sheet to determine if this space can safely manage the system charge in the event of a leak in zone 2. Now, before we do that, of course, I have to just take one slide to give a quick plug of our proprietary design simulator software. I'm a huge fan. Now, this tool allows you, by the way, it's a free download. It allows you to configure really any combination, or should I say allowable combination of indoor and outdoor equipment, the number of zones, piping lengths, and options. So Design Simulator also will automatically adjust the delivered system capacities based upon your design conditions and piping distances. So for example, if you're designing something to other than 95 outside or 80 degrees indoors, or 47 outdoor. So Design Sim will ensure that all of your selected equipment is fully compatible and provides ever important total system charge info. So really, in summary, it serves as an effective safeguard for every AIRSTAGE project, not just VRF, but includes H-Series single zone and multi-zone systems. So in this example that you see at the top, we selected, again, the all-new AGUH, in this case, the 09, floor-mounted unit, and we've got it installed at approximately the same elevation as the outdoor unit with an estimated 30-foot line set length. So it's important to remember that the floor-mounted series units include the integrated LDS, meaning an additional LDS device is not required, again, providing that circulation alone is sufficient. So whether or not that's true, let's go ahead and take a look. So referencing our 15.2 cheat sheet, and as we just mentioned, since the floor-mounted unit includes the LDS to initiate circulation, we can reference the orange tables on the right, that is with air circulation that you see. And in doing so, you'll note that when you intersect the dispersal area, the row going across of 250 square feet, at the dispersal height column of 2 feet, we see the maximum allowed system charge is 4.8 pounds, with the first level of mitigation, again, that being air circulation. So the challenge is we've got a system charge of 5.5 pounds that you see on the upper left. So we're looking at the 36 kW AS4. Factory charge is 5.5 pounds up to 164 feet of total line length. We can only manage 4.8, but we need 5.5. So thinking this through, what options could you propose in order to make sure the dispersal volume could manage that entire 5.5 pounds? Well, the first and perhaps simplest solution would be to consider a different indoor unit that provides an increase in the dispersal height, such as a wall-mounted indoor unit. That is, of course, if the option is acceptable to the homeowner. So, but using a 7-foot dispersal height then in that column, you see that in the green cells, even without air circulation, the maximum allowable charge is 12.9 pounds. So this means that in this case, no mitigation action is required as the refrigerant charge is compliant for that particular space. However, let's assume that in lieu of putting a wall-mounted unit, the customer is committed to using the floor-mounted unit because they are that nice. And in that case, they're relying upon you to find really a creative solution. So this is where practical application comes into play, using the knowledge of everything we just talked about here since we started to solve an actual scenario just like this. Let's take a quick step back now. Again, with the AGUH, we said, again, the first level of mitigation is circulation and activated by the integrated LDS. That is, you do not need the wall-mounted option. But as we saw in the scenario, circulation alone is not enough to achieve compliance, again, with that 2-foot dispersal height. So that means the next level of mitigation, again, ventilation. So through introduction of outdoor air or air from another space, the refrigeration concentration in the space will be diluted as opposed to just mixed. So an important detail about the standard is that it specifies the required ventilation CFM, not a fixed number of air exchanges, meaning exhaust air is not necessarily required. And this is where the solution comes together. So as you can see in the inset there on the bottom, red rectangle, that adding just 50 CFM of ventilation air operating in conjunction with circulation, now our maximum allowable refrigerant charge is increased to 6.6 pounds. So how did I come up with that? Well, the 4.8 pound charge that we saw with ventilation, and if we add 50 CFM, that bumps up the max allowable system charge by 1.8 pounds. Just add the two together. That's how we come up with this 6.6 pounds. Now, that exceeds the system charge of 5.5 pounds, so we're good. But if you look to the left of that 1.8 pound entry, in the blue box, I highlighted that because instead of 50 CFM, what if we introduced 20 CFM? So that adds 0.8 pounds, which brings it up to a max allowable charge of 5.6 pounds. So by definition, 5.6 pounds is greater than the 5.5 factory charge, but it's pretty close. And, practically speaking, I don't think there's going to be much difference in cost to facilitate 50 CFM instead of 20. So in my opinion, it's always best to favor on the side of safety. This is a practical example of how the expansion kit and the gas sensor working together, again, whether it's the added accessory or the one integrated to the unit, that when they work together, provide a straightforward path to charge compliance. So the choice of the ventilation device itself is not really prescribed by ASHRAE, that is, whether you use an outdoor fan, ERV, or HRV along those lines, just as long as the ventilation CFM that's required is provided. So let's see the LDS selection to wrap up what we just discussed for this system. We know that we need the expansion kit to initiate ventilation. And again, since the floor-mounted unit has got the integrated LDS, we will not need gas sensor accessory. So in addition, the expansion kit does include the UART cable, but that's to connect the expansion kit to the indoor unit. So to wrap up this multi-zone example, you can see a pattern that path compliance with ASHRAE standards is smarter, not harder, when using our H-Series systems. So let's shift now and talk about a commercial application for single-zone H-Series systems. In this example, let's just say it's an assisted living facility. So by ASHRAE definition, where occupants cannot readily leave the premise or a portion of the premise without the assistance of others, in this example, it would be considered what they call an institutional occupancy. So the point to make here is regardless of the maximum allowable refrigerant charge, now it's worded a little bit differently in standard 15, it's known as what they call effective dispersal volume charge, or EDVC, that in institutional occupancies and LDS is always going to be required, period. Using that as a given, let's say that each apartment is going to require 9,000 BTU, let's just say an ASUH 09KM as in Mary. KMAS, that's part of the Altair family of wall-mounted units. Now, as Kushala discussed, all current production wall-mounted units will require a firmware update to be LDS compatible. So again, when you want that gas sensor to be able to communicate with the indoor unit, we have to do an indoor unit firmware update. The table excerpt that you see from our application bulletin shows that we only need to add the gas sensor kit and the UART cable to initiate circulation. Now, as Kushal had outlined as well, that remember the OTA update is accomplished exclusively through the AIRSTAGE mobile only. But in this case, a Wi-Fi adapter accessory is not going to be required because it is built in to the Altair 700 units, as well as the Orion XLTH and XLTH Plus. But with the other compatible wall-mounted units, the Wi-Fi module accessory will be required on site, even if it's just for a temporary connection to facilitate the OTA update. Here's a QR code that will take you to the applications library in Access. Now, when you scan that and open it up, the top folder that you're going to see is called A2L Application Resources. And within that folder, you're going to find a wealth of simplified information that really helps unpack product-specific and application-specific details to help you navigate through the standards. In conclusion of today's VPX, we can summarize what we've covered by reviewing that all ducted and floor-mounted indoor units do include the integrated LDS that is fully compatible with expansion kit use when it's needed. And we offer a wide range of indoor unit LDS compatibility, again, with exception, as Kushal has mentioned, of the entry tier Altair 300. So that's an important point to remember. So we discussed the two primary mitigation options, and we saw that really there's only two LDS devices needed to cover pretty much any application requirement. And as a reminder, the current production wall-mounted LDS units, again, need a firmware update, which Kushal thoroughly reviewed. And again, to promote the many resources that we have available within the application library, again, to help you navigate through these safety standards. But wait, there's more. We want you to come on back. We want you to know that we also have two critically important and informative VPX events planned for later this spring. So keep an eye on your inbox for the announcements, as I'm sure you'll definitely want to attend these. So the first is going to be in May, and the topic is going to be 2026 must-know regulations and policy across North America. And talk about a volatile topic. Oh my gosh, we have a fantastic team that will help with the regulatory navigation. Great folks. And in June, we've got the overview of our next generation R32 VRF, otherwise known as VU7 and J7. And again, that would cover the single phase as well as primarily our three-phase R32 VRF systems. To close for today, we really, again, thank you for your time and attention. We know that time is valuable and hope that you found today's information informative and applicable to all of your projects. And as always, if you need some assistance with LDS selection, please reach out. Don't hesitate. We're here to help. We'll go ahead and take some time now to answer some questions. I see there are some. So thank you again for your attendance and have a fantastic day.